Welcome, young jerks. Night 2 of COVID. Feeling a little bit better tonight. Got the antivirals. COVID is no joke. Last night was a very difficult night for me, but I survived it. I'm doing good. Let me button up my shirt a little bit. As you see, I'm not usually wearing the usual suit jacket. I'm wearing a hat again. I'm just doing comfort these shows with COVID right now because I'm lucky I'm even here. But we the show must go on, especially last night's show and tonight's show. It's vitally important, I feel like, to continue to do the show right now. We took a week off last week because we were trying to work on our awards event and some other things we're doing, but we have so many great big shows coming up. And last night was another one of those with the Truly Florida workers. People are still talking about that today. Hopefully all week. Hopefully people will continue to talk about that story, about what's going on with True Leaf. But tonight we're going to pivot. We're going to get into cannabis policy locally and nationally, likely. We have someone on the show. Let me fix that for us. Okay. I've got a couple things going on. I'm out of control here, but that's okay. Let me just fix my phone too. But we have a great guest. This is it's kind of interesting. I don't even know how I'm going to introduce it, honestly, but it's someone that I have criticized in the past. And they're coming on the show tonight. And it's someone that is a serious person, someone that has some influence, definitely in the cannabis industry in Massachusetts right now, and for a while, actually. And I'm really happy that they're coming on the show to talk to us about some of the maybe shared interests that we have and maybe answer some of your calls. I'm going to let her introduce herself because she's got a great background. We have a lot of things in common, actually. She went to a state school, UMass, I believe. I went to Bridgewater State, so I always like state university in Massachusetts. Folks or colleges or community colleges. I just love those folks the most, oftentimes. But she's also a cannabis user, so I'm really excited to bring her up right now. She's a former executive of New England Treatment Access. And if you followed our work for quite a while, that's where the criticism came in. But she has since become a Massachusetts Cannabis Advisory Board member. And that's really what I want to talk about with her tonight. And so I'm going to bring her up right now. I'm really happy and honored that she's agreed to come on the show tonight. Let's bring her up. Amanda Rositano, welcome to the Young Jerks.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here. I'm stealing this from another show. This guy, Caleb, he has a thing that he does where he asks the guests to give their 5-minute life story.
All right.
To kick off the show. So you have quite a story. So what's your 5-minute life story?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me tonight. As you mentioned, we got a little bit of a history, but I think we can all work past that. Really all about sort of building bridges in this industry and helping to move it forward in the most positive way. So grateful to be here tonight to be able to speak to your audience and talk a little bit about the work that I've been doing with the Cannabis Advisory Board in Massachusetts and kind of beyond. So I guess my story in cannabis. I mean, I've been a cannabis person, I would say, pretty much my whole life. My parents were cannabis users. I didn't really know that until later on in life, when I really learned about how cannabis had impacted my father's life in a real positive way, and was sort of something that helped him work through a lot of depression and anxiety issues that he had after losing a child. I lost my father when I was 16 years old and struggled with a lot of anxiety and other issues as a result of that. I'm trying to tell my story in 5 minutes, but it's like some of these pieces, like I could just break off and talk about for a long time. So long story short, cannabis has been really important to me from both a medicinal value, but also from a social justice standpoint. And when I got to be sort of a young adult and was a pretty, regular cannabis user, really understood the disproportionate harms that had been the result of cannabis prohibition, and sort of set it to be one of my goals to start to influence and help to change cannabis policy. So I got my undergrad degree at Emerson College, but then to your point, I went back and I did a graduate program at UMass Boston specifically to focus on politics and public policy. I went to work in the legislature. I worked for Representative Frank Smizek, who, when I joined, was a 6-time lead sponsor of medical cannabis legislation here in the state of Massachusetts. I had just finished up that program at UMass, where I focused my studies on cannabis policy reform. In 2008, wrote a paper called The Morality of Marijuana, trying to make the case for marijuana legalization and really access to medicinal marijuana for patients who needed it first and foremost. Interviewed folks like Lester Grinspoon, who you know is a legend in this space, Matt Allen, who is the head of the Mass Patient Advocacy Alliance, and others to really put that case forward. Went to work in the legislature, got to work on the medical law after it eventually passed via ballot, and then worked hand in hand with the Department of Public Health and the rep that I worked for to really advocate for the piece of the law that allows a doctor to write a recommendation for any debilitating condition. So that was sort of the thing that we pushed for, and we were successful in getting through my process working in the legislature. That's where I got to know the founders of NETA, and it was after they had been awarded one of the first medical licenses in the state that I joined the team. I was their first employee, and as the story goes, I was there for the course of 7 years and worked my way up in the organization to become the head of operations, the head of compliance, and then eventually became the president of the company right as it was being acquired, before it was acquired by Surterra Wellness in 2019. Sorry. I left in 2020 for a variety of reasons that I won't get into, but really just the way that I like to describe it is like it felt time for me to take my impact elsewhere. While I was at NETA, you know, I was appointed to the Cannabis Advisory Board, and after I left, I was appointed for a second term. So I have, you know, been heavily involved in policy work from the beginning here. I advocated for things like the exclusivity period for social equity applicants, the wholesale delivery license. You know, when most other operators were saying we shouldn't do this, that was something that, you know, and so, you know, I've tried to use my position in the industry to advocate for policy changes that I think, you know, will drive the industry forward. And that's sort of my goal now. After I left, I started my own company. It's called Soulstar Holdings. I'm the CEO and founder, and we are starting a retail store in New Jersey this summer. And then we are also the winners of one of 16 social equity licenses that were awarded in the state with our partner in Connecticut to launch cultivation and manufacturing operations in Connecticut. So still involved on the operations side, and still heavily involved on the policy side, and sort of really have this interesting perspective now of seeing these other markets too come to life after Massachusetts on the East Coast, and how they're approaching some of the very issues like testing, like social equity, like just operations in general, as compared to how we did it here. So I think learning from what we've done here. I love cannabis. I always have. I'm a longtime consumer. It's something that makes me a better person and a better parent. I have 2 kids at home, 5 and 10, and my husband, who also owns and operates Pico Restaurant in the south end of Boston. So a quick shout out there.
No way.
Yeah. So
I didn't know that.
Yep.
I know Pico. How do I know Pico? I think isn't there some politicians that do parties there?
So Pico's, but it's a long-standing South End institution. We do gourmet pizza, homemade ice cream. It's been around for a while. So you may have just heard it.
I know it. Yeah. I think I've been there actually a few times. Now I'm realizing, yes, the pizza.
So that's, I guess, my 5-minute version of my background. But I've been in this space for a long time, and I care a lot about the direction of the industry, and hoping to leverage my influence as a Cannabis Advisory Board member to help drive policy changes here in Massachusetts, you know, to the benefit of consumers and patients and businesses alike, because I think we can do that.
Now you mentioned a name from the past, Matt Allen, who
Yeah.
I know very well. It's funny because I was at the New England Cannabis Convention with you this weekend, and I just looked around and I saw a lot of young people, which is awesome. But I realized that they don't even recall like 10 years ago, like what was going on back then. I know you do because you're talking about times before it was even medically legal. What do you think about just how this has gone? Like, are you surprised how it's turned out? Because to me, it's kind of like I don't know. I never expected it to happen like this. I don't know. It just like really surprising to see the way it is now.
I I think that we have a long ways to go, but I'm grateful every day that like I live in a place that cannabis is legal for adults who are 21, right? We've come a long way. I think that we are seeing more and more states coming online prioritizing social equity, and so it's not an afterthought. It's foundational to building these programs in these new markets, which I think is progress, right? None of these programs are perfect. None of them have figured out the secret sauce to like making an equitable industry, but everybody keeps putting their best foot forward. Well, a foot forward. It's who knows if it's the best or not. So I'm optimistic that we can continue to make progress, but we have to keep going, right? Like people have to keep being involved. We can't just sort of, it's crazy. Sometimes I still talk to people in Massachusetts who don't even know that it's legal. Or, I'm a parent. I have two kids. I've got a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old. And I'm talking to other parents who like to consume cannabis, right? I had a whole basketball team over yesterday after championship game. And, people are like, oh, they like what I do and they want to talk about cannabis, but it's so hush hush still, right? So like, I just think there's such a ways to go in terms of like normalizing this as something that is a lifestyle choice or, something no different than anything else that an adult chooses to use. And sort of reframing the conversation about cannabis in our society. I think it's time to reframe the conversation.
It's funny because I see the opposite side of that too, where younger people don't even, especially the ones living in Massachusetts, like they are like shocked that someone like myself was arrested for just using cannabis, for medical use. I had been arrested for it in Massachusetts. Like, I'm not a guy that's 100 years old. You know what I mean? So they look at me and they're like, they can't believe that happened in our lifetime. Some of them, they're just like assume that it's just like it's cool now, So
No, it's a really good point. The flip side of that is like really appreciating how far we have come and like
right.
how much work went into that. Um, yeah, I totally agree. It's definitely something we can take for granted to be able to go out to the store and pick up some weed.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that unfortunately we can't. Dick Boston Talking Joint memo put out a like a I don't know what you call it. I'm trying to find the right words, my COVID mind, but it's kind of like a guide, info on the convention for out of towners. One of the things they mention is that you can't consume inside, but don't worry about outside. And it's so true now. Like even though when we passed the legalization, there was, this thing that you could still get a fine outside, which some of us, actually were worried about at first. We actually started doing protests asking them to fine us, and they wouldn't fine us. But now they don't fine at all. I don't know if people can hear that. I'm hearing it through my headphones. But nobody like gets fined anymore. Like there's no cops will drive by you smoking a joint, and it's really not an issue in Massachusetts anymore, which is it's like night and day compared to the past. I feel like it's not an issue anymore. As long as I'm not in the car, if I'm sitting outside, I'm not going to get harassed by police.
Well, hopefully that's true for everybody, but it might not be. That certain
It depends
communities.
on where you live too, right?
Exactly. And it depends on how you look as to whether or not you're still going to get harassed by police. So again, I think there's a long way to go, but we need to keep chipping away at it and, keep improving. I think the policy side of things, but also, the discussion and, the openness about talking about cannabis and what it means to be a cannabis consumer doesn't mean you're, a sloppy stoner. And, like some of the most productive people I know are people who consume cannabis every day or multiple times a day, and it actually makes them more functional. I'm one of those people. So
Yeah, me too. I always said that I think I worked so hard so I could afford my cannabis. Like, I don't know. That's just a mindset, I think a lot of people have that kind of mindset. Um, let's get to the kind of advisory board. Tell us about the Massachusetts Cannabis Advisory Board that you serve on and what its role is and what you guys are working on right now.
sure. So the advisory board is a 25 member appointed board that's appointed by the state treasurer, the state attorney general, and the governor, I believe, are the three appointing offices. And it's a volunteer board, so nobody's getting paid to be on the Cannabis Advisory Board, and it's comprised of experts from a variety of different stakeholder groups, folks from the industry, folks from law enforcement, folks, with all different backgrounds that can bring something to the table as it relates to thinking through and making recommendations on cannabis policy for the Cannabis Control Commission. So it's our job to advise and make recommendations to the Cannabis Control Commission on regulatory issues and policy issues. Typically, the way that the advisory board works is it's broken up into subcommittees with certain topic areas. So there is and I don't have these memorized, but I'll try my best. There's a market participation subcommittee that focuses on participation in the cannabis industry. And there's a research subcommittee. There's a public health subcommittee. And I cannot remember. I think there's a couple of others, but I sit on the cannabis research subcommittee, which is chaired by Dr. Marion McNabb. I also sit on the market participation subcommittee, which Kim Napoli, who was supposed to be here with us tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you.
Had some issues.
We advertised that Kim Napoli would be here tonight. Unfortunately, she's having some technical issues with the internet. So I definitely miss Kim Napoli being here tonight. I know probably some listeners do too. So I'm glad. Thank you for bringing that out, Amanda.
Yeah, no problem. So, I can, so the advisory board is only as active as its members, make it, right? And so it's one of those things where, it depends on and who's chairing the committee and how much time and effort they're going to put into it, what's going to come out of the other side of that subcommittee. So I've been fortunate to have, to have active committees this go around, where we've been really focusing on this regulatory period that's going to be coming up. The CCC right now is entering or has entered its regulatory review period, and our subcommittees are taking a look at some of the most important issues that we think should be taken up by the Cannabis Control Commission. The research subcommittee, for example. We've made recommendations that related to access for veterans, improving access for veterans here in Massachusetts. And most recently, we released our draft recommendations that speak to lab testing here in Massachusetts and labeling of cannabis and cannabis products, and some of the improvements we think can be made there, but also acknowledging in those recommendations that it's a complicated topic and that there needs to be some more study on some of these. So that's sort of built into the recommendations in and of itself. So, the advisory board, I think, is a really important voice. And I think that this commission in particular is really paying attention to the advisory board, has really engaged the advisory board. I think in the past, it's been kind of a mixed bag in terms of how serious the advisory board is being taken from the cannabis control commissioners themselves. But this particular commission, I think, has been really great in terms of Kimberly Roy, for example, has been at every single one of our research subcommittee meetings. She's listening, she's contributing. So I think we're seeing a lot more from the commission themselves in terms of leveraging that body. And, maybe I'm a little bit soft, but I cut the commission some slack because, for the first couple of years, they're getting an industry up and running, right? And yes, they're supposed to leverage this body to help to do that, but it's a lot to take on, to organize these meetings and to get the feedback from all. So I think it's been definitely been more and more active. That's my experience. Although in the earlier days, I think the advisory board did make some really important recommendations that led to things like the exclusivity period and the wholesale licenses. But my experience is that it's being taken more seriously than ever. And we're really excited about putting these recommendations out and the opportunity for us to fix some of these issues that have a really significant impact on operators and also on consumers.
You mentioned expanding access for veterans.
Yeah.
Like, what are some of the things you're kind of considering or proposing that would help veterans?
Yeah. So, gosh, I'd have to go back to my recommendations to remember exactly where we landed. And we had some really, and I apologize because I've been so focused on lab recommendations the last couple of weeks. But, I think that one of the things that we were recommending is allowing any. I'm trying to think of the wording. Right now, VA doctors can't recommend cannabis.
So it's maybe the Stephen Mandilli bill, because I know we've covered that.
Yeah. So he was Stephen Mandilli he came and spoke before our subcommittee, and he was really, I think, extremely helpful in helping us to shape what these recommendations should look like, but really is trying to break down some of these barriers of needing this doctor's recommendation to be able to certify for medical cannabis. So if you have some sort of qualifying condition based on your VA diagnosis, that you can automatically be enrolled without having that, that write-off from the doctor. So that was part of it. I feel bad because I'm blanking on some of the other.
No, it's okay. I'm springing this on you. So I
should have came prepared with all my subcommittee recommendations. But this past week, the Globe reported on some of the lab recommendations that our subcommittee has put forth as well. And again, this is something that we take really seriously when we take up an issue like lab testing, because it has implications on all sides of the industry, right? On the one hand, this is the mechanism for making sure that the products that are going out to our consumers are safe, that, especially when we're talking about medical patients, that they're getting, a product that's not going to make them sicker, right? It's how we understand dosing, and we know how much to take and can sort of gauge the impact. So it's really, really important that we have accurate lab testing on the consumer side of things. And then on the operator side of things, it's extremely expensive. And it's not super clear, some of these protocols for how you do the testing, for how you label, for how you define THC on your label. So a lot of our recommendations really are around clarifying and creating some clear definitions specifically as it relates to THC. Oh, Kim's here. Cool.
Yeah, she is. That's what I was just sending a message.
Yeah. Hey, Kim.
Hey, everyone. I am so sorry that I am late, but it sounds like you're having a great discussion.
We sure are. How you doing?
Excellent. Oh, it's been a day. It's still going on. We'll continue after this, but happy to step away from that and join you guys.
You got your internet fixed.
Yes. It's a Verizon, and I had a Starlink, but it's not set up, and I should have set it up is the lesson. Having wires is an issue, so just been dealing with that.
Well,
everyone's favorite pastime.
We're glad you're here. We're talking about different recommendations for the Mass Cannabis Advisory Board. Amanda was talking about testing. I want to hear more about the testing. Like what kind of things are you considering right now, Amanda?
So that's, one recommendation is just like define what THC means, right? Some operators are you've got THC, you've got THCA, you've got all these different components, and how you actually put those on the label is it can be inconsistent from label to label, from operator to operator. So getting some consistency there. Creating standards for our labs and figuring out how we do that, right? We have, the same products, you send them to two different labs, you're getting, two different testing methods, you're getting different results. How do we ensure that that these results are accurate, or as accurate as, within a range of accuracy? And when we're talking about a live plant product, there is going to be some change over time to that product. So it's never going to be perfect, is my understanding of it. But how do we ensure that, there lab shopping is something that, you hear about, where folks are sending their stuff to a certain lab because they're getting higher numbers at that lab. And so we're really trying to understand what's going on. Why are we getting these different results? How can we create standards that the labs can be held to? How do we audit the labs to make sure that they're not fudging the numbers? How can we hold operators accountable for what they're putting on the label being accurate to what the lab results are? But then, we also recommend utilizing the secret shopper program, which the commission has at their disposal to make sure. And I think one of the things that came up in our last meeting, Commissioner Roy had suggested that perhaps they are already using this program and we just don't know about it. But we want to make sure that that it is being utilized, and it's being utilized in a way that's sort of fair, right? Because I also think that you can have a situation where a dispensary puts something on the label because that's what the lab said it was, and then they get a different result back from a secret shop. And, now are they to be penalized for the result that they got from the lab? Did that product actually change over time? And so it's coming up as a different result. So it's a really difficult thing for us to regulate, but it's something that I think that we need to get a little bit tighter around, and we need to continue to work on. And so a working group that works directly with the CCC on these issues on an ongoing basis, and brings experts in, and brings in policy research from other, best practices from other markets, so that we can continue to evaluate how to ensure that our products are safe and tested and labeled appropriately so people can use them safely. But we're not putting undue burden on operators either, because, one of my biggest concerns and things that I want us to look at as we're going into this regulatory review period is sort of eliminating some of what I like to call like the boogeyman regulations, the regulations that are there because, it's cannabis and like we have to treat it so much differently. So like, just being practical about the additional costs. And so I don't want to be in a position where we're laying so many additional regulations on operators that the folks who are the least resourced are the ones who are going to be hurt the most by that, right? So when you think about, adding lab costs and testing costs, who is that going to impact the most? The folks who are already struggling to control their costs. So I just want to make sure that if we're going to recommend that operators take on another test, that we look at the whole thing and also look at areas where we can save them money, but also create safe protocols, whether that's process validation, where, we're validating the process for how you're growing your cannabis free from pesticides and that you can't use. And we're doing tests, but not on every single batch, right? So that's something that that's a tool that certain states have leveraged.
Hey, Amanda, before you run too far away from it, I wanted to jump in real quick, just circling back to making these recommendations. The piece about common sense, I think, we've been saying that since the beginning, right? That cannabis legalization is just common sense. And we have some form of legalization, and we have what seems to be an ongoing extreme lack of common sense from lots of corners of the industry. one thing I wanted to add, as far as the groups who are concerned about the testing, and certainly operators are concerned, but also consumers, patients, right? Like they need to understand what it is they're getting and what it means and how they can best use it, especially if you're a patient. If you're looking for something specific to target some genetic trait that you have, you want to know that this is exactly what it is. And that goes to building consumer confidence, which ultimately builds to industry credibility. So we've said all along, cannabis is safer, and this is a great thing to do for the country, for the world. We need to prove that now. And I think these regulations or these recommendations you guys have been working on really serve to do that. I just want to make sure that we don't lose focus or not call attention to the very important groups that really all benefit from this change.
Just for what it's worth, I did talk about patients and consumers at the very beginning of this lab conversation. That's really at the heart of why we do lab testing, right? It's
so if I wasn't tardy,
and your internet wasn't working, you
have an excuse on that. So I want to jump in too, because the Mass Secret Shopper program, it was kind of just kind of sprung out there, but we don't really know what's going on. The public doesn't know. It seems like even the cannabis control commissioners don't know. What are your comments on this Mass Secret Shopper program? Do you have any additional comments on that? Kind of the fact that we don't know all the details of what's actually happening.
I mean, are they using it right now, or is this just an unknown thing that they know they have to use? I feel like it's like the leadership ratings that dispensaries are also supposed to get for performance or outstanding performance in certain areas. I think that one is less relevant or less important. Not that it's not a good thing, but not as important as the secret shopper program. So I personally don't know enough about it. I haven't heard reference to it up until recently. So I can't say as to whether or not it's actually happening.
So I'll add to that I think kind of the purpose of the program is for it to be a secret, right? And so we're not going to know if they're going out on a sting, but this was one of our recommendations to use this, to use this program that you have already at your disposal. You don't even have to make a regulatory change to do it. As I mentioned earlier on, Commissioner Roy has been in attendance at every single one of our research subcommittee meetings, and to this, on this topic, she sort of made a point at the last meeting to say, I can't say whether or not that it's in progress, but it's there for a reason. Let's just leave it at that, right? I don't know. I would think that if there are issues being uncovered through that program, one would hope that we would hear about it. And so, I think there's a number of different scenarios. It could be that it's not in use yet. It could be that it's in use, but it hasn't really turned up anything that's concerning. It could be that it has, and they're trying to deal with it. We don't know. So I think it's all speculation from there, but it's, I think, definitely an important tool. But I think for me, my one concern about the secret shopper program is, how you deal with this. Is sort of like, what do you do with that information once you have it? And who's responsible if you do see sort of this discrepancy between what's coming out of these dispensaries, which most of which aren't even producing their own products, and what's being reported from the secret shopper program. And so, I just think we have to be thoughtful about understanding that the composition of the cannabis plant changes over time. And so, THC may look one way when you put it in the container and it sits on the shelf for a couple months, and it looks a different way when it gets tested again. And so I think, part of the working group and understand, is for us to dig a little deeper on some of these issues and not just make recommendations about things that we don't know enough about. We acknowledge that we don't know quite enough about some of these things, and that we need to understand better, okay, if we do see discrepancies, what do we then do with that information, and how do we, bring everybody up to the standards that we need to be at, the labs, the operators, everybody. So
good stuff. Thank you so much. There's other things too that, obviously we cover quite a bit on this show, worker safety and just the worker issue right now. Um, I guess I could go two different places on this, but the first one I'll go to is with workers. Like a lot of them are listening to the show. I know tonight, and they listen often, or they listen to it later. But they're starting to realize that they need to do more than just come on the show, and they're starting to get organized and starting to work together. How can they kind of reach out to the Mass Cannabis Advisory Board, or even have an effect, do you think, on what's going on with the advisory board right now?
So I'll jump in. It's the same process I would recommend as we've done for everything, right? We pool our voices together. We communicate what our key talking points are, or begin to have some sort of understanding and alignment of beliefs and ideals and goals. And then we can begin to communicate those broadly. I know I've been reached out to by a number of, or contacted by a number of people who are interested in doing that. And it's really inspiring to see folks who have an entirely different experience in the industry, one that is unique, and yet so important, but has yet gone very unrepresented. So I like to see that. I like to see that they're getting together, and I would just encourage them to keep going. Right? There's no nothing gained if you don't risk anything. So make the call. Reach out to somebody, your legislative officials, anyone in the regulatory agencies, and not just the cannabis specific people. Talk to everybody. There's a lot of folks who work in either employment or labor law and have had a lot of input on changes to the laws regarding labor and employment in Massachusetts over the past few years. And those laws don't get changed in a vacuum. It takes a lot of input and participation. And if you want to make changes that matter, I would say focus broadly. Don't focus just in the cannabis industry, because the stuff happening here is not unique to the cannabis industry. It's across the workforce, and it's really unfortunate. Probably so unfortunate to me, because this is a new industry. We felt like starting it, we'd have this great opportunity to get rid of all that stuff, but turns out a lot of it's come with us. I don't think it's too late to change course and sort of correct what issues there are. And also, I've said this a lot. If you were at NECAN on Saturday, I'm going to say it again, but culture is super important. And right now, I don't think that the culture we thought was going to happen is what we have. And you can feel the tension, right? Like,
Oh my God.
People want change. People want something different.
Right.
So let's work together to figure out what that different is and create a culture that we all, feel like being a part of, and quite frankly, doesn't suck to be a part of.
Glad you brought that up, because I feel like that a lot lately. It's like not what I envisioned. It could be so
Totally.
much better. I go to Maine and I'm just like, that's the kind of market that I want to see. What they do in medical up there is amazing. I wish we could see that everywhere. Amanda, do you have any comment on that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, as an advisory board member, I always sort of welcome folks to reach out. So that's, I won't speak for the entire advisory board, but I've put out calls to hear from folks on just about all of the issues that my advisory subcommittees have been talking through. So, as it relates to how can you interact, just do it, just reach out if you have something to say. I'm all ears. And I think most of the members of the advisory board, feel the same way. I think not to be cliche, but like our voices are louder when they're one, right? And so to the extent that folks can get aligned and come to the table with solutions, and not just criticism, right? Because listen, it is a new industry, and some things have to develop over time, right? And so I think to the extent that we can be collaborative, that's going to be the best path forward. So I think, come to the table with solutions of what you want to see changed and how we can get there. it's definitely, to Kim's point, this is not just a specific cannabis industry issue. You know, we have workers dealing with the same types of issues all over the country right now.
One suggestion, like I know the workers are working on some of their policy proposals actually, and like I know one of them. I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't have them in front of me, but I just know that one of them is to create like advisory boards within big cultivation sites, like safety groups, employee run safety groups within the organizations, and mandate that has to happen. Is that something that you think would be doable?
I mean, it's definitely something that I've done within organizations that I've worked for, and I think it is doable, and I think it's a really effective tool for hearing from people about what the issues, you know, they're dealing. I mean, it's the bet. Getting information directly from your frontline employees is extremely important, right? And then what you do with that information once you have it. So I think mandating that, I think there could certainly be some sort of, I mean, a mandate that we have a health and safety programs. I think is something that didn't initially exist in the industry and came over time, you know, that we actually have to do these things now. So I think we can keep building on that, right? So it's beyond just having a program. How do you make sure the employee voices are actually heard?
Yes.
It's an interesting idea, you know, whether or not you can mandate a company does that. I think it's a question mark, and I think, but I think it's definitely something companies should do. It's something that companies would benefit from doing, and I think, you know, when it comes to worker safety, being in front of it is going to save you in the long run. It's going to save you money. It's going to save you headache, right? Getting a really strong program in place from day one, but that it's not enough just to have the protocols and the rules and the systems in place. You then have to have sort of this feedback loop, and you have to have continual improvement. All of those things are just like, it's a lot of work and it's hard to do for any organization, right? And so to the extent that workers can be collaborative and come forth with ideas that are constructive within your organizations and more broadly within the regulatory framework and to your policymakers, I mean, I think that's a really important first step.
I'm going to add that I think, yes, you could potentially mandate something like this. It could be a suggested or required piece of a diversity plan if you considered it to be like an employee resource group type of thing. I also just want to come right out and say that people have a real issue with the word diversity, equity, and inclusion, and social equity. It just, for some reason, triggers people into thinking like, oh, I've got to give all these advantages to people who aren't me or whatever, you know, like it just makes people not want to do it. And yet when they are recipients of that, they benefit from it. Companies do better when they have these plans. So it really does make sense to do it. I'm wondering if it's an issue of like marketing, pitching it, couching it such that it actually kind of is not so unappetizing, like putting some sugar on it. So if you think about these types of groups that you recommended, Mike, as like a well-being or health group, something of that sort that really kind of branches out and provides information beyond just what is happening in the actual, on the sales floor or in the cult. You're talking about how's your mental health, right? And how can we support employees in their lives in the building and outside the building so they feel better? And for me, it drives back to culture. That's helping to create this idea that it's more than just your job, that you're showing up to, you know, grind some weed, roll some sleeves, whatever. I would like to see it build as that. And I think more people would kind of get into it, especially when they see what kind of programs they have going on there, that it's more than just that you can actually benefit from it when you're part of the program. So yes, I think you can mandate it. And I would love to see some companies voluntarily do it because I think it sounds like a pretty cool thing to do.
Yeah, we love that. Is that your baby?
Yes, this is Shay. You want to say hi?
3 years old. It's her birthday. Hi, Shay.
Hey, Shay.
Oh my God. Is your birthday today?
Is it your birthday today?
No.
No?
No? I
How
thought it
old are
was.
you?
No.
She's just razzing you.
Oh, you're cute.
Shafi, how old are you? Are you
Hello.
3?
No.
No, okay,
You're
she's not
3?
3 either.
No?
You're silly. Okay, go see the pizza. It's here.
Oh,
Big pizza house here. Okay. Sorry about that.
no, that was fun. I'm going back now. I'm like, I got to go back to serious now. I'm having fun. I'm enjoying this. You know what? I'm going to go to some comments right now. I think I haven't even read any of them. So actually, one person wrote, here it is. Happy birthday.
Aw, thank you.
Another one was
Said Shafi.
keep up the great work, Kim, from a Facebook user.
Ooh, thanks.
Oh, here's one I want to put up because this guy is like a lab testing guy. Pretty sure. I think this is Chris. I gotta meet up with this guy. I think this is Chris from ProVerdi. He says, how can there be any accuracy in reporting or labeling when there is no clear definition of potency? Labs are free to moisture correct, inflate data or not to include other, I don't even know what that word is, isomers or not. Based on how data is manipulated, there can easily be 30% variance in reported values based on the exact same analytical data. And at least so far, this is still all okay under Massachusetts guidelines. So there's a lab testing guy. He's in the business. He's calling it out. Do you have any comments on that, maybe, Amanda?
I mean, just that I agree, right? And it's something that that I've brought up a number of times is like, my understanding is that labs can actually test with different processes. And how can we possibly be getting to the same answers? And I don't know the answer because like, this is all I don't know the answer other than to say, and what we've been recommending is like, how do we get to some standardization of this process? And we need help from the labs to figure it out, especially the honest labs who want to do the right thing because they're out there, right? And we've had a lot of support from the labs on these recommendations in terms of having more standardization and utilizing best practices. One other piece, I agree with everything you just said. One other piece, not to change the subject, that we're pushing for with the lab recommendations also is looking at microbials and how we test for microbials. And right now, and I might butcher how I say this, I'm using layman's terms here because I'm not a scientific person, but right now we only we have a threshold for microbials, and if you're above that threshold, then you fail, right? But we're not distinguishing between bad microbes and good microbes. There are such thing, right? And those good microbes, they're found in like the best ways to grow cannabis, in living soil, in organic earth, right? And so a lot of these organic farmers, which is the most sustainable way to grow cannabis, right? They are failing and they're being shut out because their products are failing for microbials. And so what we've recommended is to adjust those limits to only test for those things that are actually going to be harmful for the consumer, as opposed to just having this sort of across the board limit for microbials. So that's another one that I think is really important for consumers and for operators, right? It's a win-win. You want more soil grown, sun grown, living soil cannabis out there in the market, in my opinion, right? And you want people to be able to utilize greenhouses and other ways that don't, require so much energy. So, and it's organic, it's like, we want that, and let's not discourage people from being able to do that. So that's just another one that I wanted to call out, that I think it shouldn't be contentious.
Another similar comment came in from YouTube. He said some labs report using 0% moisture correction to inflate the THC value. Why is this now accepted in the Massachusetts market? It's pretty much the same comment as Chris. So I think we just addressed that. That was good.
I don't know. And just to be clear, the advisory board doesn't make the rules. I can't, and especially as it relates to the testing protocol. And remember, the testing protocol it was carried over from the DPH, right, and from the medical program. So, we've had some adjustments to the testing protocol, but it is a carryover and something that we really need to spend some time, I think, digging into.
And we also get some of what you had mentioned earlier, Amanda. Stigma. We got some of that coming in on a comment. I'm going to post that one. This is from Twitch, of course. We always get the worst comments from Twitch, but I like these comments. He says, "How about you work instead of smoking? I hate this drug. It's the devil on earth, for real." They're still out there. I mean, I bet I work twice as many hours every week as that guy does. Right?
It was nice of you to say.
Twitch. Don't you love Twitch? I love Twitch.
Those comments just, I'm like, okay, well, that's someone I don't need to talk to.
You know what, though? I love it because we never like we're starting to get comments from Twitch, and I love when they come in because they're either like awesome, really good comments, or they're like this, which is it's awesome in a different way.
Exactly. I'll take that back and I'll say it reminds me that there's still work to do, right? There's still people out there who have a certain perception, who may react to a certain way. And it keeps me on my game. Like I've heard some comments about, the evils of cannabis of late that like it's worse than gambling, like, or it's the same as gambling. It's just, it's again, keeps me on my toes, keeps me young. Once I get over the initial shock of the fact that we can have this much legalization, decrim, medical, et cetera, and people are still like, I can't believe it.
And clearly there are productive people consuming cannabis in this world, some of the most.
Yeah, and there's a lot of productive people consuming alcohol and all kinds of other drugs, and functioning at significantly less functional levels that we readily accept. Not to marry the two and not be able to tear them apart, but I really don't think that weed is that bad.
No, not at all. Look at Paul McCartney. I mean, look at a guy like Paul McCartney. You telling me he's not a hard worker? I mean, guy's still out playing shows. I mean, I don't know. I just think they're out to lunch when they say stuff like this. We got a follow-up question from ProVerde Labs on the testing discussion. They're asking, there is not a clear understanding of exactly what microbes are dangerous. How many are you going to require testing for? There is more than just E. coli and salmonella and aspergillus that are potentially harmful.
I'd be curious what ProVerde's recommendation is around this and how we resolve. I'm all ears. I don't claim to know what the answer is. I know that there are other ways to approach it that other markets are utilizing. But I think that we should not be shutting people out, and we have to find a way to distinguish between what's harmful and not. There have been people who are smarter than me on this topic who have wrote extensively and petitioned to the CCC to make recommendations on exactly which microbes to test for. And I would recommend that we take a hard look at this petition that was made to the CCC. And I think the labs need to be involved in the conversation. I don't think anyone's trying to shut out the labs. I think they have, more insight onto some of this than others. But I also don't think that it's, what's the word I'm looking for? Fair is not the word that I'm looking for, but I think there's a lot of disparities between how things are handled across the many different labs that we have here in the state, and that folks are looking for some consistency. Hey, Noah.
Another question that I want to ask you both is, there's a lot of layoffs happening right now. Is that an opportunity to open up the industry more, to kind of, like, I look at Maine, I always go back to Maine, 3,000 licensed caregivers. Yeah, I love it up there. Is there an opportunity to like even look at, like, we relax the rules on caregivers a little bit, but they still can't be a for-profit business. Is there an opportunity to like make caregivers like totally like Maine, where they can have a business out of it?
I think there's always that opportunity, right? Like the layoffs, and I wouldn't necessarily relate the two. Certainly, someone who was hoping to go into that business might find themselves with more time and be able to if they were recently laid off. But apart from that, I think that the issue of caregivers is just such an important one. If I'll bring it back to the patients specifically, if you find something that works for you, that's what you should use, right? Why are you going to continue looking? I have a friend whose son had ATRT, and he was diagnosed at 5 months old. She's up in Maine. She was able to have one of the a provider up there create a special tincture for him, or a special blend just for him. And she was able to administer it through D-tube at Children's Hospital in Boston. It was exactly how this should work, and the fact that it's like so rare, and she had to go out and find that on her own. I mean, it's to me an endless sob story, one that should never happen, but yet continues to happen. I'm going to keep talking, baby. She wants me to stop talking. Maybe I should. Maybe she has a point.
I mean, I'm generally in favor of lowering barriers for folks to get into the industry, and I think it's definitely an interesting thought. I think we're definitely seeing a bit of a reckoning in this industry with all of these layoffs, and some of these companies that got too big for their britches, right, and just got in too deep, and are now having to make these decisions that they're not good for anybody. So I think, I think just finding, not only exploring things like, can we open up the industry? Can we have a stronger caregiver program? But like, how do we take these other licensing opportunities that we've tried to create with lower barriers, like the delivery licenses that are, exclusively available to certain groups? How do we make those licenses more approachable and less expensive, and reduce the burdens there as well? So I think that we should be looking at all of these avenues for bringing more people into the industry, and opening up access.
I would love that. I want to add on micro grows. Like I got a friend who's a licensed micro. He grows very small cultivation. They're getting ripped off by the dispensaries in a lot of cases. It would be so much better if we could buy directly from those guys too. Like, they're small. Like, why are we not letting them sell direct to customers?
I love that. I actually love that, and I think that would be even more practical approach than broadening the caregiver program. I think like a direct to consumer, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe you're not sure, but I think that there's the craft cooperative license allows for D2C, but like nobody can get it done because it's just like so burdensome, right? So that's the other thing. Like, we create these license types that are supposed to be more accessible, but then we layer in these rules that like make them like almost unfeasible from a business perspective.
So right? I just want to add and jump in real quick to add that micro businesses actually can get a delivery endorsement so that they can deliver direct to consuber in Massachusetts.
They can.
So that's,
I mean, I was thinking of
not the delivery is the, not the delivery is the greatest. I don't know that they're going to be making, with the way the regulations are, I don't know if delivery is the most advantageous endeavor. However, if they can do it right and they can deliver direct to consumer, it might expand. Certainly if we get rid of the 2-driver requirement, that would help. Sorry to interrupt, Amanda.
No, or what about allowing craft cultivators to have social consumption sites, right? Similar to like a craft brewery where you go and they have a tap house. Like, it's actually a lot more practical.
Wicked practical. It makes sense.
Running delivery or allowing them to have a small retail outlet, right? Because delivery
is tough at Mass too.
Hard. It's so hard to do, and it's so expensive. And I'll just say, like, we got to get rid of the 2-driver rule, right? Because that's like one thing that's really, really easy for us to do that will help these delivery operators reduce some of their costs. But we don't have the population density across the state to make delivery a really viable business opportunity for a lot of people. Like, you don't have the infrastructure. So I like the idea of being able to go to a craft grow that's growing my beautiful craft cannabis and having a consumption area where I can try it and then take some home.
I
Just
love
like-
that.
You know-
And that's like tourists too. Like think about it. It's like when you go to like a vineyard. You know what I mean? You go to the wine tasting. It's the same idea. It's like it creates tourism. It's what you want. I think that's such a good idea.
For those listening at home, I will say that there are opportunities like that present themselves currently across the state. Since the commission hasn't, at least to date, put those regulations for social consumption in place such that people can take advantage of those license types, there are, I mean, it's legal to consume in certain places at certain times under certain circumstances. There are ways that you could potentially look into doing that if you're interested. Social clubs, et cetera. Those are things that people who really want to get a jump on it and maybe kind of wet their beak a little, see what it's like. Before going forward and applying for the license, that might be something to look into. I know folks are doing it now in the state, couple spots in Cambridge, et cetera. I think the future looks great for social consumption. And if you're wondering how you can get into the industry, that might be an excellent opportunity.
So you're telling me there's a couple social consumption spots in Cambridge right now?
In the works. And it's
In the
more
works,
like,
okay.
I think if you think about it like events. So originally when we first legalized Question 4, and then the ballot measure was rewritten, there were single day or event type licenses
That's
for
right,
social
yep.
consumption. So if you look at it like that, as in like, you don't necessarily need to have a license that you possess and that's all that you do. You could get a license for something that you're just going to do this one time. And you're an event company that now this is a social consumption event. It really opens up the opportunity. I would like to see them put that into place and really get the regulations around that, such that they're common sense, that they're practicable, and people can make the money that was promised to them. And I think before they do that, or while they're doing that, they should also extend the exclusivity period for social consumption, especially, and delivery, because with the 2-driver requirement, folks have not been able to make that generational wealth that was promised to them. And if they do actually move to remove the requirement, which it sounds like they might be doing, it'll be a really short time that folks get to kind of start to hit the sweet spot before it's taken away and opened up to everyone. So an extension of the exclusivity period for social consumption and delivery licenses, I think, would be beneficial in terms of really making sure that we hit that social equity high water mark that we'd set for ourselves.
Excellent. We had a follow-up comment from Chris Sedula again from ProVerde. He said, I could provide peer-reviewed literature and have in the past on what microbes are common to cannabis that are potentially harmful to humans. If he wants to send that to you, how can he send that information to you, Amanda or Kim?
Yeah, Dr. McNabb posted, I believe, our draft recommendations. I mean, feel free to reach out to me directly. I can leave an email address if you want, but we may have already. Well, we do have. I guess somebody has made these recommendations already to what these harmful pathogens are, and I wonder if Chris has played a role in that already. So I'm not sure, but I'd be willing to definitely have whatever information that he has available and take that in.
Awesome.
And for my part, we have 2 tentatively scheduled market participation subcommittee meetings. One is Monday, April 10th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. The second is Friday, April 28th, also from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. We will be hearing from workers at least one of, if not both of those. We try to take public comment. So Chris, folks from ProVerde, anyone watching, listening, if you want to join in and share constructive thoughts on how we can do better, or call attention to things that we should be considering, please join. There will be a public notice posted on the commission's website, should be posted within the next couple of weeks, as well as an agenda. But those are great opportunities to connect and share your thoughts.
Thank you so much, Kim Napoli. We have 2 Massachusetts Cannabis Advisory Board members tonight as guests. We're very honored that you both spending some time with us answering the questions. To wrap it up, is there anything that you want to kind of discuss or bring up or bring attention to tonight that we didn't touch on?
I'm going to take an opportunity to step in right here because I was late, as we all know. And just for what we're talking about, just give a preview of the upcoming advisory board meeting for market participation. We are talking still about discounting, allowing for discounting and consumer loyalty programs on the adult use side. It currently only exists on the medical side, and that's just a huge mistake. The prices are bottoming out. Folks can't breed customer loyalty. And they can't, there's just a lot of issues with it. We'll talk more about it, but that's something that is near and dear to my heart, and I can't wait to dive back into that. Removing the requirement of vertical integration is another piece that we think is very important. Again, on the medical side, you're required to be vertically integrated, have cultivation, processing, and retail sales. And you also pay a lot more for those prices or for those license types. So we're looking to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to jump in and serve the medical community of patients. And we hope to do that through removing that requirement and aligning the fee structures. There was also one interesting thing that I don't know how you feel about this, Mike, and I know, Amanda, you've heard about this before, but one of the proposals was to lower the employment age for working in the cannabis industry in Mass to 18. Just, that's something where we have at least one member who's interested in talking about and is going to provide us some facts and details around that. But thought that'd be cool to let folks know. Might have more opportunities in the cannabis industry for folks if we do that.
And a larger, I think, access to more employees as well. I think that's part of, just, broadening the applicant pool. Yeah, I would say just as we're going into, and I touched on this a little bit, but as we're going into this regulatory review period with the Cannabis Control Commission, as the advisory board is making recommendations through the various subcommittees, I just want to my objective here is to continue to push us towards a more, practical and less sort of, I want us to be thinking about this industry less from a place of fear and more from a place of progress, right? And moving things forward. Now we have years and years under our belts of having legal cannabis. The sky has not fallen. We should be really scrutinizing everything to say, is this necessary? Is it protecting? Is it helping? Is it hurting, right? And should we get rid of it or should we revise it? And so things like the 2-driver rule, right? Things like vertical integration where it's, why shouldn't patients be able to access cannabis at every single dispensary in the state? That's just crazy. Some of the security measures and the costs that go into outfitting our delivery vehicles, testing and how we do testing. Let's look at all of this through the lens of, we have data now. And we have years and years of information that we can build off of and stop starting from a place of we have to put in the strictest rules we can to make sure that people feel comfortable with this. So I'm really encouraged about what we're hearing from the commissioners about the things that are important to them to change. I think we have a really proactive commission right now that's eager to take some of these things on. And I think we need to take advantage of that as an advisory board, but as the public in general as well. And we talked about what workers can be doing, be part of the conversation, come together, come with solutions. So, just to kind of reiterate some of the stuff we talked about today, there's a real opportunity and the time is right to make some big changes in how we do this. And we've been a leader here in Massachusetts. Other markets are watching, right? New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, these guys are all just coming online. What we do really matters, and it shapes the trajectory of East Coast cannabis. So I hope that we can get it right, and we'll continue to make progress. And yeah.
Yeah,
I love it.
I want to, can I add one thing or two
Yes.
things just quickly? So on the topic of holding folks accountable, being accountable, yes, we all have responsibility to actively participate, but I don't want to let this go past this opportunity to go past without saying that the companies that are putting their bottom dollar and money ahead of their patients, their consumers, their employees, you guys, this is one of those vibe check situations where we have to be you know what? I wouldn't like it if that were done to me. Maybe I shouldn't support that. and we do this like again, more than just the cannabis industry. There are companies that are burning down the Amazon rainforest and, enslaving children in foreign countries, and we still buy their products. We don't have to, we shouldn't, right? We should do better than that. So let's all take some accountability and vote with our dollars and support people who support policies that support us. I think that's for me, just the headline, this industry and in general for this world. I feel like everybody could be doing just a little bit better, myself included. I know that's not really about the cannabis industry, but I think it does tie back into it, because if we get too focused on the small stuff, we lose sight of the bigger picture, which is what did we all start this for? To make the world a better place, right? So I'm such a hippie on your show, Mike.
Thank you so much. I just got a funny comment I want to put up too. This is a good one. Great show, MC. Hate the curtains. I'm gonna put myself on. They don't like my curtains. I didn't pick the curtains. My girlfriend bought those. I like them. I mean, I don't know.
Larry.
What's wrong with the curtains? Are they bad? Do you guys not like them?
I just want to know what's outside the curtains. What's behind the curtains? That's what I always wonder.
You want me to open up the curtains tonight?
Yeah, what surprised us one show.
Oh man,
we can all take bets as to what it is.
You'll see my car. It's basically
okay.
it. Outside, yeah. I mean, yeah. You'll see me. You'll see where we smoke.
Well, that's worth it.
Yeah, it's our patio. Yeah.
It's a mystery.
Yes. It's very funny though. I want to thank you both so much for being here tonight. This was a great conversation. I think we covered a lot of territory. How can people get in touch with you or reach out if they want to, just touch base? Is there any email or contact form? How would they touch base if they wanted to give you feedback on anything tonight?
I'm on Facebook, friends with Mike. So if you find Mike's page, you can find me. I am on Instagram, Kim Napoli ESQ, and I'm on LinkedIn, and my email is kim@kimnapoliesq.com. So
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm also in all of those places. LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to find me. I think I'm the only Amanda Rositano on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, A Rositano. I'm on Facebook, but I'm not sure if people can see me on Facebook. I don't know how my settings are, but definitely you can get me on LinkedIn and on Instagram. Yeah, looking forward to hearing from folks.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. Amanda Rositano and Kim Napoli, both Massachusetts Cannabis Advisory Board members. And you can see they care about this. A lot of the same things we do, which is a better cannabis industry. I mean, we just need it, really. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Amanda.
Bye, Kim.